Hi, Padre Beatrice Gale, RMC chaplain, coming to you today from my garage. We're going to talk about Luke 21, verses 5 to 19. Very interesting, complex passage. We're going to break it down into kind of 4 areas of interest and really be talking about how this leads us toward the next season, which is Advent, and in particular Christmas. Starts with Jesus and his friends walking by the temple, this magnificent building, and of course the writer Luke would have been writing from a time after the temple's destruction. But this is Jesus said they're saying, look how magnificent it is, and Jesus says, I tell you, not one stone will be left on another. And this is sort of reminds us that of the temporary nature of our institutions, of our buildings, and which says something about who we're supposed to be as people of faith. We're called to do something more than just upkeep buildings. And I would say that at RMC, although the buildings hold us, there's a spirit of the place and an intent of the Spirit, and really that good intent of the Spirit, not necessarily the way that has not always been met. It's that good spirit of the intent that that leads toward the eternal. It leads towards something that cannot fall down, something that cannot die. After this, they want to know when, because the idea of the destruction of the temple would have been a sign of the end of times. And when Luke was writing, he was pretty sure probably that the end of history was about to happen. And throughout the ages, there have been many people who have used religious stories to point toward the impending end. I'm sure that you know of, or you've met some of these people too, or maybe you yourself have been tempted by the idea of apocalyptic theology. I love apocalyptic theology and would love to talk to anybody about it. But in this case, one of the things that we're warned about is not predicting, because Jesus says there will be wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and all kinds of disasters and destruction. But this is not a sign of the end. In fact, this is a sign that you're being called to testify. And I think in this case, when it says, Jesus says you're going to be called to testify, and in particular, it's talking about this. Number one was the destruction of the temple, like that the buildings, the things that house the eternal. Number 2 being that the end is not yet, and that we should be very careful about what the signs of the ends might be. But 3, that we will be betrayed, and 4, that we will be called to testify. And this idea of betrayal and testimony is a dangerous one, because I think that a lot of very well-meaning Christians have taken this to say that you can tell that you are on the right track if everybody hates you, if the world hates you. In fact, this is what Jesus is saying here. Everyone is going to hate you. But we have to be very careful about why. I would say that if we are going to follow the law of love that Jesus is talking about, then that people are going to hate us because we will not succumb. We will not fall into the temptation of the idea that disasters show that God hates us, or that a life that's being torn apart is a sign of somebody who is not favored. In fact, disaster and terrible things that happen in the world are an opportunity for us to show our faith and for us to shine and to share. Now, when I say an opportunity, I don't mean like it's a good thing, but it's like in the bad, look for the good. It's one of my favorite quotes from Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, is, in the midst of the bad, look for the good people and what they're doing. And so I think that this is what this passage is talking about. And when we're called to testify, Jesus says, don't prepare any of your words, because our hearts need to be pure and ready. In other words, we need to make sure that we are Always, always, always living into that law of love, that law of radical welcome, that law that the when I say law, I mean grace. Actually, it's not that rule of love, that compulsion to be a creature of pure love, like our eternal selves. So we look like, we go, everything's been sort of leading, and now we're kind of at this crux. And then next week is the last week in Pentecost, and then we're going to go into the season of Advent, which is a season of darkness. And one of the things that we see here is that God has not come. The end has not happened. The Messiah has not returned. And so that is an opportunity for us to reflect, but also to wonder, what are we supposed to do in the meantime? Why are we left waiting? What is happening? Why is God waiting? What is God waiting for? And that kind of attitude, actually, I get that. I feel that way sometimes, but it's actually quite insidious. And what it does is it interrupts my ability when if I am going to be called before the authorities. That disappointment is not the testimony. The testimony is that God has given us something very precious. And that is this thing that's called love, this thing called hope, this thing called faith. And that we are called to live it out, especially when it seems impossible to. We don't need God to help us do these things in good times. We don't need God to help us be strong and secure in times of peace and prosperity, but rather God is always calling to us to say, I see you, I love you, I know you. Inside and out, you are wonderfully made, and you are being asked to share that wonder. You're being asked in the midst of the darkness of the seasons and the season that we're about to enter into, to remain that small point of light. Because a small point of light, when everything is bright, may not seem that spectacular, but in the dark, one small candle can make all the difference in between being able to navigate and not, in between being able to operate at all and not. So never underestimate the power of being that small light. And this is something that requires not just practice, but instead a depth of faith, knowing that God is with you, that God is for you, and God will never forsake you. Now, that's easy to say, but when your life is in turmoil, and it seems like things are not going to get better, I realize that it's not just that easy. And that's why we start to talk about the season of Advent, which is not next week. We have the Reign of Christ Sunday next week, which leads us in, which is the last Sunday of the Christian calendar year. And then we start a new year. But that new year starts in darkness. Our pre-Christmas readings are ones normally which talk about the idea of, what God's end state is, what God's goal is for the earth. And some of those readings, like this one, can be a little alarming, but they're very important for us, and they're telling us to do something, and that is prepare a way. So this is part of this too. When we're talking about preparing a way, we're not talking about building a big temple. We're not talking about being afraid of all the craziness that's going on. But we're called, and it's not about losing heart when even those that you thought that had your back, all of a sudden you realize that they're not with you. But it's in knowing that God never abandons. God never leaves us alone. God never leaves us. And so this is one of the things in these readings we see this is not always easy. In fact, that it is very difficult. And it's when things are difficult that we see how it actually works. That's when the holiness can come through in the midst of that. If we can hold on, we get to be we can see it. And if we can't hold on, then that is the time when hopefully there will be some other small point of light in our life, and we're asked to seek for it, to look for those other points of light, and to quest for them, and then to be drawn to them. That's one of the things that we're meant to do for each other. When we are doing well, when all is good for us, may we let our light shine. And when our light cannot shine, may we seek others, so that just as our light is shining, that they may see us, we may see them, and be drawn to them and take strength in their faith. Because sometimes that's what we need to do. It's not just about our faith, but it's about our collective faith. So I urge you patience and steadiness and constant hope, that you, in this week, that you continue to look for opportunities to hope, especially in the midst of things that seem wild and not like there could be any hope in them, and to walk toward that. I hope that this message has found you well. If not, call any time. It's a great privilege to be among you and to be at RMC. I hope that as we take these next steps into this next part of the year, that we can learn something new, because this is every season, every year, newness springs, and hopefully surprises come with it. Good surprises or new challenges, whatever it is that we need to grow. God bless you. Thank you very much.